a while, but I'm back. I wanted to make an update on the weather because we do have an active pattern ahead that could bring repeated rounds of severe weather for areas across the United States. So I just opened the Storm Prediction Center website to see outlooks. Today's a relatively calm day for severe weather as we just have a couple of marginal risks throughout the northern plains. Not sure why it's not loading. Throughout the northern plains and areas like North, South Dakota, and Minnesota, and then down further south near New Mexico, Texas, the Panhandle of Oklahoma, southwestern Kansas, and southeastern Colorado. We're just mostly looking at a wind and hail threat, especially hail for that southern risk. The wind threat includes both of those threats, and then that hail threat, as I said, is just for that southern threat. And then we do have a little bit of a tornado threat, but it's almost funny how little area it actually takes up and only 13,000 people included. But if you do happen to be in one of these areas, you should stay weather aware today as storms are possible. Looking at our day 2 outlook, we see the risk of severe weather. We see a risk of severe weather in the Great Lakes area, including lots of Michigan, eastern Illinois, northern Indiana, and northwestern Ohio. That includes areas like Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, Milwaukee, and Toledo. And we're mostly looking at a wind and hail threat again, but we do have a tornado threat that does include most of that risk. So we'll want to stay weather aware in these areas because there is a chance for severe weather. But by far the biggest day is looking like Wednesday. We have an enhanced risk of severe weather that includes areas like St. Louis and Indianapolis. We can add our cities on here. Also Peoria, Springfield, and then Hannibal and Missouri. This is going to be a big day for severe weather, and we do have a tornado threat on the table. Looking at our probabilistic, we can see this threat up to a 30% Sig 1 threat throughout this area, but we do not see specific hazard threats until our day 2 outlook, so we will be able to see that tomorrow. And then looking on WeatherWise for more interactive view to see some of the more smaller towns or locations in there. You can see this enhanced restriction from just east of Kansas City into about Muncie, Indiana, and then the slight risk includes areas like Chicago, Columbus, Ohio, Cincinnati, over towards Wichita, Kansas, Kansas City, and Des Moines, Iowa. So it is encompassing a pretty large area, especially this marginal risk that goes from Minneapolis down into Oklahoma and over towards near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So the next thing I want to show you is this little tool on National Weather Service St. Louis's website where you can actually see more hazards, comparing some more tools that we like to use to see hazards. Day 1, not much here. Day 2, not much there either, but you do see that tornado threat appearing on the SPC, and then we do see some other hot spots for potential hail and wind on that Colorado State University forecast. And as we look at that CPS view, you can also see that area highlighted in similar places to the SPC outlook. And then day 3, you can see that more robust threat highlighted on all the models, especially in that Midwest to Ohio Valley area. And then day 4, I didn't show this yet, but we do see another risk shifting more to the East Coast, including areas like Washington, D.C., New York, and Philadelphia. After that, we do see a little bit of a lull. We could see a resurgence of severe weather starting in the western plains, but the SPC does not have any areas highlighted yet because it is kind of uncertain how that will occur, where, and intensity. So that's why we see that predictability too low. But it does remain obvious that there's an active pattern and that we could see some more rounds of severe weather throughout the rest of the coming week. So looking at models, I'm looking at the Rufus model for kind of an idea of where these storms will happen. You can see today that threat in the northern plains up towards the Canada border. It looks kind of messy, but we still could see a severe storm or two pop up around there. And then those storms kind of fizzle out throughout the overnight hours. And then as we head into tomorrow, you see that risk where we looked at in the Great Lakes area. See those storms move through midday, and that could pose a tornado threat. If we want to look more closely at the area, on this model we can see it here. See those storms develop around the late morning, early afternoon, and continue throughout the afternoon, especially looking in here for maybe a tornado threat. If those storms can, especially if they can remain discrete and not form into such of a messy cluster. And then an early look at Wednesday's event. The Rufus wants to have quite a bit of morning convection, kind of just linger throughout the northeastern part of this risk, but that could still pose a tornado threat as well as damaging wind and large hail. This model shows rotation tracks, so these darker like shaded areas behind the storms kind of shows where this model thinks storms could be rotating and potentially produce a tornado, because as we get into that mid to late afternoon period, you really see those storms flare up. This is around 4 to 5 Central Time, and this is where we could see that most robust tornado threat, especially across northeastern Missouri, central Illinois, and even into parts of southeastern Iowa when those storms first initiate. As we head into the early overnight hours, late evening, you see those storms continue to potentially rotate as they form into more of a line and cluster, heading into southern Indiana, including the St. Louis area, heading into central Indiana, and all the way over into most of Ohio. And as we head into the overnight, the storms should start to weaken as they head into far southern Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, but we could still see some isolated severe weather. And then those storms will really start to weaken as we get into the early morning hours on Thursday. Looking at the HRRR model, another view, this model does not go out until our Wednesday event yet, but we can see today in that Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota area. And then tomorrow we can see where those storms could develop into Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and pose that severe weather threat as we head into the afternoon and evening, eventually moving into Ohio as they weaken. So the next thing I want to look at is tropical weather. We actually have a disturbance in the Gulf. This does have a chance of producing a tropical depression or storm. Only a 30% chance right now. It's not looking super concerning from a tropical storm or hurricane standpoint, but it could produce some heavy rain. As we look at this Euro model, we can see that it expects this disturbance to move up into the Texas area along the Gulf and maybe move inland closer to Louisiana. Again, not looking at a huge risk of a tropical storm or hurricane, but it does have a chance of developing and will certainly produce some heavy rain as it moves inland. And then you can see it almost moves offshore as a much weaker system as we get towards the weekend. Looking at rainfall predictions from the Weather Prediction Center, you can see that swath of heavy rain, upwards of 10, even 15 inches near that Louisiana, Texas border, and then continuing into Gulf Coast states like Alabama and Mississippi, Georgia. And then you can see where we have these repeated rounds of storms, especially in Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, where we could also see beneficial rainfall upwards of 3 inches. And you can see that along the Gulf Coast, some of these areas could use some rain. So this will be good for them, but we might still see flooding concerns because of all that at once is still not a great sign. That's just too much. And then looking at the longer term outlook, you can kind of see this pattern staying consistent with slightly below normal average temperatures expected across the north and northeastern half of the United States, with above normal temperatures expected for the other half. And then you can also see above average precipitation chances dominating for most of the country. And then 8 to 14 day, you can kind of see how it stays similar with that colder air northeast and warmer air southwest compared to average, and then same with precipitation staying above normal expected throughout the central US. Okay, so I just wanted to make this video. I hope it was okay and kind of gave you an idea of what to expect over the next few days, especially if you're in those severe weather areas. So if you're in there, please stay weather aware, and thanks for watching.